Hello everybody and welcome to part 5 of what if Izuku Midoriya was the avatar of MHA. If you happen to like the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing if you're new. You can always also check out my Discord, link to that in the description below. All that said, I hope you enjoy the video. A group of villains managed to invade the unforeseen simulation joint, surprising the heroes. The situation was grim, but the students prevailed. They fought the villains inside the facility, buying time. Ida managed to escape the facility and called for help. All Might was the first to respond, bursting into the facility and fighting off the villains. Unluckily, one of them posed a massive threat to the symbol of peace. Still, thanks to the help of Shota Aizawa, Katsuki Bakugo, Shoto Todoroki, and Eijiro Kirishima, All Might fought off the villains and forced them to retreat. The students had to go through an interview process with the police and went home after. Because of the situation, classes were suspended for a day. This was done to allow the students to heal and relax and enable the faculty and police to investigate and talk the situation over. Because of what happened, Izuku was patched up, a bunch of bandages being placed over his body to block the enormous bruise on his chest. After he felt good enough to leave, he headed home where he ate dinner and crashed on his bed for over 12 hours. He had spent a lot of energy and had to recover it. The next day, Izuku woke up, did some homework, and decided to go to a spot in the woods where he'd have some peace and quiet. Once there, he started practicing some kung fu movements. Izuku began to reflect on what happened in the USJ. Not to mention, you haven't used your fire yet. What's up with that? He remembered that lady saying as he practiced. As he finished his set of movements, he accidentally shot out a small flame. The realization snapped him out of thought quickly. He readjusted the flame and caught it above his hand before it could start a forest fire. He then stared at it for a moment, letting a memory play over it. It was 3 years ago. He and Kacchan had just gotten into an argument in the playground. Usually, it wouldn't be that bad, but this time it escalated into a fight. Both of them were itching to test their mettle against each other, to find out who was the better of the two, so that's what it came to. Both combatants held their own for the most part. Baku was full on the offensive, forcing Izuku to block and evade while looking for small openings to exploit. Eventually, things got so bad for Midoriya that he couldn't redirect the attack. The adrenaline surging within him and the heat of the moment caused his quirk to fully awaken. He just stopped the flame that originated from Bakugo's explosion. For a second, he marveled at the flame while Bakugo scoffed. Bakugo then rushed at Izuku again. Midoriya shot the flame out at his opponent. Bakugo quickly moved out of the way and the flame hit one of Izuku's classmates who was observing the fight. The teachers then intervened, stopping the fight. Izuku couldn't help but remember the pain expression that his classmate had on his face because of him. The kid was sent to the hospital and had to be treated for second-degree burns. Once the memory passed, Izuku closed his palm, quelling the fire. It was getting late and he had already trained for quite a while, so Izuku headed home where he watched his favorite video, ate dinner, and went to bed. Soon enough, school was back in session. Subsequently, the students returned to class where they started chatting about the events that had occurred at the USJ and being on the news. As they talked, the clock ticked, inching ever closer to the beginning of class. Once it struck 8:24, Yaoyorozu walked to the podium and asked the class to seat themselves, a request which they followed. Moments later, Aizawa entered the room. He was wearing an arm cast and a couple of bandages, but the damage he had sustained was pretty low. He spent homeroom class explaining the prospects of the upcoming sports festival. Most students were excited at the idea, but some expressed their concerns, which Aizawa quelled quickly, explaining that the school had prepared in case villains were to attack again. Classes resumed normally for the day, with the students going through all their regular classes. Of course, lunch period arrived and the students spent their time socializing while they ate. Izuku sat down with his friends and enjoyed a quite pleasant meal. The 2 remaining periods went by rather quickly, and the time to go home arrived. The students of Class 1A got ready to leave, but found their doorway blocked by a group of students from other classes. A student with purple hair, who introduced himself as Shinso, stepped out of the crowd to declare war on the class. He warned all of them that if they weren't careful, he'd steal their spot in the hero course. After that declaration, the students went home. The students had their sights set on their next objective, the UA Sports Festival, and to that end, they started training like there was no tomorrow. Izuku was no exception. He practiced different techniques with air, water, and earth, trying to improve his mastery even further. He had no way of knowing what obstacles he'd face, so he'd have to be ready for everything. On one of his days off from school, Inko asked him to pick up some groceries on his way back from practicing in the woods. While passing by a store, a book caught Izuku's attention. It was about meditation and finding your spiritual center. Interested in it, Izuku bought it and started reading it on his way home. It was an excellent way to relax and stay focused. Before he realized it, the 2 weeks of training passed and the day of the sports festival arrived. After a motivating talk with his mother, Izuku left for school. Once all the students arrived, they were guided to the changing rooms where they put on their sports uniforms and prepared for the coming trials. After a while, the students were called into the stadium by President Mike. "Now, for the introductory speech," Midnight said, introducing herself as the chief umpire once everyone entered the stadium. The introduction came to mixed results. "For the student pledge, we have Katsuki Bakugo." Calmly, Bakugo stepped out of the crowd and went up to the stage. He approached the mic and gave a short speech. "I just want to say, I'm gonna win." That comment instantly painted a target on the backs of the students of Class 1A, angering most of their competition and even making the audience look at them in a more negative light. Regardless of the circumstances, the festival proceeded as planned, with Midnight announcing the first event. A wheel went through a bunch of different options, ending on the option of obstacle race. Knowing what the game would be, it was now her job to explain the details, so that's what she did. After the rules of the race had been explained, while the students got into positions, Izuku started formulating a strategy. Once all the students were in position, the countdown started and the race began. As soon as the countdown hit 0, everyone started running. Midoriya once again used his airbending to enhance his running speed, taking an early lead. While he took the head, many others were caught by the narrow tunnel. Once Todoroki exited said tunnel, following behind Izuku, he froze it over, trapping many students in place. He then kept running, trying to catch up to Izuku. He even shot out ice in his direction, but Izuku jumped over the wave of ice, evading it easily. However, when he jumped over the ice wave, he left himself open and was hit by one of the robots that showed themselves as the first obstacle. Todoroki just kept running, seeing the new opponents in front of him. While Midoriya recovered, he froze them over off balance and continued the race. Midoriya tried to follow but had to jump back as the robots fell down. Once the coast was clear, Izuku continued the race, trying to catch up to Todoroki, but many other students had already overtaken him. Midoriya reached the next obstacle quite quickly, with only Todoroki, Bakugo, and 4 others in front of him. "Let's see, there are a couple different ways I can go about this, but I think this is the easiest," he thought to himself. Izuku moved his arms in a circular fashion. He slowly started accumulating more and more air until a ball of flowing air was made in his arms. He then started running, throwing the ball on the ground and putting one of his legs into it. It required a lot of concentration to maintain, but it allowed for quick and balanced transportation along the lines between platforms. He didn't even have to stop once he reached the next platform. He just kept going until he reached the next obstacle. Todoroki and a couple of other students had already reached the minefield and were slowly traversing it, trying to reach the end. "Heh, this crap can't slow me down," Bakugo announced as he shot past Todoroki in the race. Midoriya had taken a careful look at the situation. He planted his leg on the ground and moved it. A series of explosions went off in the outer part of the minefield. Midoriya then started running along the path he had created at full speed. Seeing him take the advantage, Bakugo accelerated, focusing his attention on Midoriya. Todoroki also focused on the young bender, making an ice path that allowed him to reach the end more quickly. Midoriya made it to the end of the obstacle first and erected a wall to block his opponents from overtaking him. He then continued running. The wall he made didn't stop Bakugo, who just jumped over it and continued. Seeing Bakugo get closer, Izuku made a couple of boulders and shot them at Bakugo. He managed to block the first, but the second hit him, throwing him down. Midoriya now had a clear path to the finish line and no immediate adversaries, so he kept running until he entered the final tunnel. But before he could cross the finish line, a wave of ice washed over him, freezing almost his entire body. The only parts of him that weren't encased in ice were one of his palms and his head. Midoriya looked back, spotting Todoroki, who had managed to get over the wall he had made. Bakugo was also right behind him. Midoriya opened his palm and made a fire, while Todoroki entered the tunnel, creating a wall of ice behind him to block Bakugo. Izuku freed his arm with a flame, which allowed him to waterbend the ice away from him. He tried to stop Todoroki with the water, but it was too late. He'd already secured first place. Midoriya was the second to cross the finish line, having freed himself from the ice, with Bakugo claiming third place. More and more students then started crossing the finish line. Once the race had ended, and the results were revealed, the top 42 contestants were called together in order to prepare for the next event of the sports festival. It was announced to be a cavalry battle, and the details behind it were revealed to the students. The moment the students' points were revealed was also the moment that a huge target was painted on Todoroki's back, but the boy was a capable fighter, so it wouldn't hamper him much. The students were then given time to go into groups for the event. Midoriya started looking through the crowd of people as the team started being formed. "Hey, Deku!" Uraraka said, sneaking up behind him, giving him a small fright. "Wanna team up?" "Oh, hey Uraraka, you scared me there for a second," Midoriya said. "I was actually looking for you. Yeah, I was going to ask you the same thing." "Nice! We're on the same page then. In sync," Uraraka said. "What about Ida?" Midoriya asked. "I already told him of my idea, but he said he wanted to go on his own. Todoroki asked him to join first, so he's going to ally with him, I think," Uraraka explained. "I see. So we'll have to come up with another plan then. If we can't get speed, then getting someone who has range is crucial," Midoriya reasoned, knowing precisely who they should ask to join. They approached Tokoyami, who quickly accepted the position, knowing that Midoriya was good at coming up with strategies and he had a capable quirk that wouldn't conflict with his own. Their team was set, but a girl then approached them with pink hair that wore some strange contraptions around her body. "Join up with me, person in second place!" she demanded. Who are you?" Midoriya asked. "I'm Mei Hatsumi from the support course. I don't know you, but I could be useful to someone in your position," she said bluntly. She had first approached the person in first place, but he said no, so now she was asking Midoriya for a spot on his team. After giving some convincing arguments and showing what she had to work with, she was accepted into the group. After the time for getting into groups ended, everyone got into positions, and the match began. As soon as it did, almost every team went after Todoroki and his 10 million points. He, however, had foreseen this and used a combination of his team's powers to shock everyone into place before freezing them over. He then used the opportunity to steal some of their headbands, even though he already had the lead. Once everyone was frozen over, Midoriya's team approached along with Bakugo's, although he ended up being distracted by Monoma's group. Midoriya and company went after Team Todoroki. Seeing them coming, Ida started running away at top speed, but before he could get far, Izuku bent the ice around them, creating a wall of ice in front of them. "Damn it! I thought by freezing over the ground he wouldn't be able to manipulate it, but he can use my ice too," Todoroki thought, trying to come up with a strategy. They had already gotten rid of their human stun gun and couldn't run away. Even if he attacked, Midoriya would be able to shoot the eyes right back at them. While he was deliberating what to do, Yaoyorozu acted, creating 2 flashbang grenades and throwing them into the air, blinding their opponents. Team Todoroki then used the opportunity to run away. Team Midoriya was going to follow behind, but Hatsume noted that they had opponents there they could steal headbands from, so that's what they did, gathering a couple of different points. Midoriya's team then went after Todoroki's during the whole battle. They managed to escape many times, but Yaoyorozu had to deplete more and more of her energy to stay in the running every time. However, in the end, Midoriya's team managed to steal a headband from Todoroki's team. It wasn't the 10 million points, but still helped them out. The battle continued for another minute, with many headbands swapping places over this time. In the end, Todoroki's team ended up first, Midoriya's second, Shinso's third, and Bakugo's fourth, with the rest of the teams all having 0 points. The cavalry battle over, the students were given an hour off to go eat lunch. After lunch, the brackets for the final event were going to be decided, but before they were, Ojiro spoke up, giving his spot up in the final. He thought it was unfair he was allowed to move on when he remembered nothing from the previous event. His unwillingness to move on inspired Nirengeki Shoda to forfeit as well. Needing to fill the brackets, some students from lower-ranking teams were called up. They picked lots to decide the matches. In the end, those ended up being Izuku against Shinso, Todoroki against Zero, Kaminari against Ibara, Ida against Hatsume, Tokoyami against Yaoyorozu, Ashido against Aoyama, Kirishima against Tetsutetsu, and Bakugo against Uraraka. After the matches were decided, the school hosted the recreational games in order for those who didn't pass on to still have fun, while also giving those who passed time to prepare. During this time, Ojiro informed Midoriya on Shinso's quirk, giving him a slight advantage in the battle to come. Soon after, Midoriya and Shinso stepped into the arena, ready for the first match. "So you can just give up," Shinso said, putting Midoriya on edge. He had been warned about the boy's quirk and knew not to give in to such an obvious taunt. "In a way, this is a test of how strong your spirit is. If you know what you want your future to hold for you, you can't worry about what other people think." President Mike announced the beginning of the match, but Shinso didn't stop. "That monkey was going on about his pride earlier, but I just think he's an idiot for throwing away his chance like that," Shinso continued, angering Midoriya. Midoriya planted himself firmly on the ground as a response. "Don't you dare talk about him that way," Izuku shouted, preparing to attack his adversary. He needed to defend his friend's honor. Before he could unleash any form of attack, however, Midoriya's expression went blank and he returned to an upright position. "That's it," Shinso said. From his point of view, it was already over. "I win." Izuku was now under his control. It was normal to think such a thing. "So here we are. You're lucky to have been blessed, Izuku Midoriya. Now turn around and walk out of bounds like a good little hero," the purple-haired boy ordered. Midoriya's eyes then started glowing and the wind around him became unsettled. It started moving around him from one direction to another without any pattern. "What the hell?" Shinso exclaimed in surprise. His opponent was under his control, yet he wasn't obeying him. Why? Why wasn't he doing it? "How? You shouldn't have control right now. What did you do?" Shinso asked in a last desperate attempt to bring Midoriya back under his control. Midoriya raised his hand and pointed at Shinso. The wind around them was directed at him, slowly pushing Shinso back. Shinso tried adjusting his position to resist the wind, but its strength only increased as a result. He planted his hands into the ground, trying desperately to hold on, to stay in the match, but the wind just got stronger, sending the purple-haired boy flying out of bounds. However, before he could hit the wall, the wind adjusted, placing Shinso softly on the ground. The wind calmed down quickly. Midoriya's eyes stopped glowing, and he fell to his knees. still conscious but tired. He seemed to be breathing heavily. Midoriya was proclaimed the victor of the round. On his way out of the arena, he talked a bit to Shinso, trying to figure out his motivation and cheer him on forward. Because of a conversation Todoroki had had with his father before the match started, his mood had been ruined. As soon as the second match began, Zero tried to throw Todoroki out of bounds. Todoroki used the piece of tape that Zero had used against him and instantly froze him into a giant glacier. He overdid it a bit, but managed to win the match relatively quickly. The third match was between Ibara Shiozaki and Denki Kaminari. Kaminari wanted to win it quickly, so he went for discriminate attack. "Indiscriminate shock! 1.3 million volts!" he shouted, unleashing his most deadly attack. Ibara, to defend herself, just placed her hair in the ground and created an insulated shield. She then shot some of her vines and trapped Kaminari, since he was immobilized for a couple seconds and gave no effort to free himself because of his state of mind. Kaminari was disqualified from the match and Ibara claimed victory. The fourth match was between Hatsume and Ida. Hatsume used this opportunity to promote all her inventions, using Ida as a test dummy. Once the exposition was over, she stepped out of bounds, allowing Ida to pass on. The fifth match of the round was between Aoyama and Ashido. Aoyama tried to quickly throw Ashido out of bounds using his naval laser, but Ashido used her acid to skate around the arena to evade the attacks. She eventually managed to get in close enough to disable her opponents, effectively winning the match with one quick uppercut. The sixth match was between Yayorozu and Tokoyami. The match started with Yayorozu making a shield to protect herself. On the other side of the battlefield, Tokoyami sent Dark Shadow after her. He bashed against the shield over and over, slowly pushing her back until eventually she was forced out of the arena. Tokoyami claimed victory and managed to pass on to the next round. A fierce battle took place for the seventh match, one between Ejiro Kirishima and Tetsutetsu Tetsutetsu. Both students gave it their all, trying to beat the other, but in the end, they proved to be evenly matched, resulting in a tie. To decide the winner, an arm wrestling match took place, which Kirishima managed to win. The final match of the first round was a fierce battle between Ochako Uraraka and Katsuki Bakugo. The girl fought bravely against the odds, doing all she could to defeat her opponent. Sadly, his overwhelming firepower ended up beating her determination. Hence, she ended up losing the fight. Both Todoroki and Midoriya stepped into the battlefield, ready for the second round to begin. Todoroki knew how tricky an opponent Midoriya could be, especially if he didn't catch him off guard, so he'd have to take him out quickly. Midoriya, however, counted on making the battle last. He planned on focusing on evading and attacking when he had small openings. Midnight signaled the beginning of the match. The second she did, Todoroki shot his first attack, sending an ice blast meant to freeze Midoriya in place directly at his opponent. Midoriya just stomped on the ground, making a small piece of earth come out of the ground, redirecting Todoroki's attack. "You have incredible proficiency and accuracy with your quirk, but you can't readjust course once you shoot your attack, can you?" Midoriya asked. "Crap," Todoroki thought, sending another attack at Midoriya. This time, he sent one straight at him while shooting another curved one to catch him off guard. Midoriya hit the ground again, shooting himself into the air, surprising Todoroki. While in the air, Midoriya shot a massive gust of air at him. The shot made direct impact, sending him back. He almost fell out of bounds, but Todoroki managed to make an ice slope to stop himself. Midoriya landed on the ground while keeping his distance. If he got too close to Todoroki, then he'd be easier to freeze in place. Todoroki created a small glacier going in Izuku's direction. It stopped before reaching him, however. Todoroki then started running on it, wanting to use it as a platform to attack Midoriya from a higher vantage point. Before he could get far, Midoriya took a step while sending his arms in opposite directions. The ice turned to water and split apart, leaving Todoroki to fall down. Once he hit the ground, Midoriya turned the water into small ice projectiles and shot them at Todoroki. Todoroki erected another barrier of ice and blocked the attack. The barrier then started moving, pushing Todoroki towards the edge of the arena. He struggled slightly but managed to jump out of the way before being pushed out. I'm not going to be able to win like this, Todoroki thought to himself. Every attack I throw at him is just giving him more ammunition to use against me. The constant use of my ice is also making my movements more sluggish, only just seems to be in top shape. At this rate I'll have to... You're getting slower, Todoroki, Midoriya announced. Why aren't you using it? Why aren't you using your fire? That's rich coming from you, Todoroki responded. You know your quirk makes a lot more sense now that I've seen you use the last element. During the race, it was the first time I saw you using fire. Why is that? I asked you first. It's only polite you answer before I do, Izuku shouted back. My father put you up to this, didn't he? Todoroki questioned. It was the only logical explanation. Midoriya had never before pried into his personal life in such a way. He had to have orchestrated things. As Todoroki asked this question, he shot another attack at Midoriya. There's nothing to do with him, Midoriya shouted, spinning around, redirecting the attack with a spin. This is just between you and me. So answer me, Todoroki, why aren't you using your power? Everyone is giving this their all, except you. I won't allow that. It's because I don't want to use his power, Todoroki shouted, shooting an enormous blast of ice at Midoriya while he did so. The glacier that was unleashed just split in two and fell to the sides of the arena. Whose power are you talking about, Todoroki? The only thing I see is you refusing to use your quirk, so give me everything you got! Fine, but you better not hold back either, Todoroki shouted back, activating his fire side. His body started heating, balancing the cold temperature it had been at before. Once he felt warm again, he shot a massive blast of fire at Midoriya. To defend, Midoriya put his hands together and dove into the flames, splitting it apart. He then opened his arms, splitting up the fire. He concentrated the flames that were still around, spun while motioning for it to gather, and shot his arms at Todoroki. The fire combined into a stream and shot back towards him. Todoroki erected a wall of ice to block the fire. He then focused back on Midoriya, who was doing another set of moves. Before Todoroki could act, the pieces of the glacier that were at their sides turned to water and went towards Todoroki, swallowing him whole. While inside the water, Todoroki activated his fire side, trying to free himself by evaporating the water, but it did little but accelerate the process. In a matter of seconds, Todoroki had fallen unconscious. Once he had stopped moving and let the air out, Midoriya immediately let the water dissipate into the arena. While Todoroki started dreaming of past memories, Midoriya rushed to his side, using his waterbending to pull out any water that had gotten into the boy's lungs. Izuku had won the match and passed on to the next round. The second match of the round began. As soon as it did, Ida rushed at his opponent, running the plant girl out of bounds before she could even react. It proved somewhat anticlimactic, but he managed to secure victory. The third match of the quarterfinals was between Ashido and Tokoyami. For this fight, Tokoyami held the advantage. Mina's acid needed direct contact to be effective, but she didn't manage to make contact once, since Dark Shadow was blocking every attack. She was hard to pin down since she was moving around so rapidly across the battlefield, but in the end, Tokoyami managed to force her out of bounds, winning the match and passing on to the semifinals. The final match of the round was between Kirishima and Bakugo. Bakugo, having the range, used it to his advantage, barraging Kirishima with attacks until his quirk gave out, at which point he pinned him down, winning the match and passing to the next round. Midoriya knew his adversary well. He knew Ida's quirk and how he operated, so as soon as the match started, he planted himself firmly in the ground and lifted his arms. The outside of the arena became a vast wall that enclosed the two combatants. Ida tried to struggle, he tried to win, but Midoriya had the advantage in power, and he just kept shrinking the space more and more, limiting Ida's capabilities more and more. In the end, Midoriya managed to trap Ida in the ground. He won the match with that move and moved on to the finals. As soon as the second match of the semifinals started, Tokoyami sent Dark Shadow at his opponent, trying to defeat him quickly. Bakugo, however, launched a couple of explosions at the monster to throw him back. He quickly noticed the monster's weakness to light and subdued it, pinning Tokoyami pretty quickly after. In less than 2 minutes, he managed to secure victory. "Ready for another rematch, Kachan?" Midoriya asked once he stepped into the battlefield. "I'm not losing this time, Deku. Especially not to an ass-pull move like last time," Bakugo proclaimed. Midnight then announced the start of the fight, and both students rushed at each other ready to attack. Bakugo charged up his explosions ready to unleash one at Midoriya. Once he got close enough, Midoriya ducked under the attack, hitting the ground up into Bakugo's arm, hitting him in the elbow in such a way that it caused his arm to go numb. Feeling the weird sensation in his arm, Bakugo jumped back, creating some distance between himself and Izuku. Midoriya didn't relent. He rushed at Bakugo, opening his palm and shooting a fire blast into his stomach. Bakugo was thrown back and had to reel from another attack. Still, Izuku didn't relent. He rushed at Bakugo again, ready for another attack. Seeing little option as Izuku was coming towards him at high speeds, Bakugo opened his palm, positioned it towards the ground at an angle, grabbed onto his arm and unleashed a gigantic explosion from his numbed arm, snapping it back into shape. The explosion was powerful enough to create a small crater while launching Bakugo into the air. Izuku was too close to the explosion. It knocked him back a significant amount. Izuku recovered from the attack quickly, but found that his ears were ringing. He couldn't rely on his sense of hearing, so he started looking around, looking for his opponent. He was nowhere to be found, so Izuku looked up, spotting Bakugo in midair. Bakugo was using small explosions to create spinning force. Realizing what he was doing, Izuku hit the floor with his legs and shot his arms up. A tent made from cement formed around him. He then hit the ground once more with his foot and jumped into the air in a spinning motion. Once he came into contact with the floor again, he acted like a drill, entering the ground and closing up the hole behind him. "You can't hide from me like that, Deku! Now die!" Bakugo shouted as he approached, charging his attack more and more. "Pulitzer Impact!" The explosion Bakugo unleashed didn't just break the concrete tent, but created a crater in the floor, sending pieces of debris all over the place. "Where are you, Deku?" Bakugo asked while looking around. It was hard to spot anything with all the dust he had just thrown into the air, but among the dust, he spotted a silhouette that seemed to be kneeling. "You can't hide from me!" he shouted as he rushed at the figure. As he got closer, Bakugo noticed that the figure was just a piece of stone made in Midoriya's image. But before he could decrease his speed, a piece of rock came out of the ground, hitting Bakugo in the chin. Bakugo tumbled back, being hit by 2 fireballs from his left. The ground around him started shaking, making him lose his footing and fall to his knees. Izuku then rushed at Bakugo, jumping into the air and kicking him in the jaw, sending him tumbling further. Bakugo tripped on a piece of rock. He got a look at it, seeing it was the one made to resemble Midoriya. Midoriya then bent the earth around Bakugo, trapping him in place. Once the smoke cleared, Izuku became visible again. He was panting heavily and had some blood dripping from his forehead. He wiped the blood from his face as he tried to catch his breath. For all he knew, Bakugo could escape and continue the battle. "The winner is Izuku Midoriya," Midnight announced. "What?" Midoriya shouted, his ears still ringing from the initial explosion. A bit after, the closing ceremonies were held. All Might even showed up to give the students their medals. Ida sadly couldn't attend due to a family emergency, but otherwise it went off as planned. The students were given their awards and even a couple of words of encouragement from the #1 hero himself. The festival was over, so everyone just went home. And that's the end of the video. As always, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. You can always also check out my Discord, link to that in the description below. So yeah, Izuku won the sports festival. After deliberating a bit and talking to some friends, I realized that this was the most likely outcome, so that's what I went with. How this impacts future of the series, we'll see in the next part. Until next time, everyone, have an absolutely fantastic day. Bye!